Okay, I think we are recording, so we can just go live.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mind Your Buffalo podcast. This is your host Ravikant, aka the Buffalo Intellectual. Today we have a very special guest with us, someone whose work I've looked up to for a long period of time, Dr. Rahul Sonpimple. He is the founder, president of All India Independent Scheduled Caste Association, and he has been a very powerful, very influential student leader in the past. Just for the audiences, for many people like myself who were completely, we are not from the movement. तो हम जब बाहर थे, we used to talk like Rahul bhai is somebody who's, we would be like, अरे उन्होंने ऐसा बोला, उन्होंने ऐसा बोला. So it's really nice to be able to sit with him and talk today. He's also building a grassroots movement. The AIISCA has also set up the Savitribai Phule Resource Center, which looks to use community spaces as a space for the movement to grow. We'll surely talk about that a lot. He's also a very prolific writer. I always make this point that some of our best intellectuals in the movement are actually outside of academia or are peripherally in the academia. Rahul Bhai's work is very widely available. He's written for a bunch of platforms. He theorizes using philosophers from Rawls to Bourdieu and connect that to caste within our South Asian circumstances. He's a very sharp political and cultural scholar, and now he's also setting up the Ambedkarian Chronicle as a space for young voices from the community to add to this kind of discourse. He so like all of those things, and I'm pretty sure if we start talking ऐसे राहुल भाई के बारे में, like there's a lot more to talk about. Thank you, Rahul Sonpimple, joining us today in my small little shit podcast. Like it's very important to have you come here and speak to us. Thank you, Jai Bhim. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Ravi. Honored to be here with you. I've been reading and watching some of your videos and on Instagram and other social media platforms. So yeah, really happy to be here and to share this screen with you. And yes, I hope it is going to be good for both of us to share ideas because you are also presenting and writing on various issues specifically on this new bunch of uh, let's say savarnas on in cultural realm. So yes, happy to be here with you.
Thank you. I think the reason, one of the interesting conversations why I was really keen to kind of talk to you, which we spoke about a little bit also. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way I see it is the movement has gone through many phases, and there is always like this sort of a gap in the middle. उसके बाद क्या आएगा हमको आइडिया नहीं होता है. So सत्यशोधक
Yes.
समाज का एक बहुत बड़ा एक इन्फ्लुएंस है, एंड देन देर इज ऑलमोस्ट लाइक दिस वैक्यूम पीरियड जब हमको नहीं समझ में आ रहा क्या होगा. फिर बाबा साहिब राइज करते हैं, एंड देन ही जस्ट लाइक बिल्ड्स एवरीथिंग. फिर उनके जाने के बाद फिर अगेन एक ऐसा मोमेंट आता है कि लाइक अब वेयर डू वी गो, एंड देन दलित पैंथर्स मूवमेंट कम्स एंड कांशीराम एंड बामसेफ कम्स. And I feel that the movement has now again entered a place like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even the conversation that you were saying कि like this savarnaizing of, so ये एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग दौर लगता है मुझे. इट्स अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग पॉइंट जहाँ पर पॉलिटिकली एंड सोशली सवर्णा समाज में सबसे ज्यादा कॉन्वर्सेशन हो रहा है ऑन कास्ट. बाबा साहेब की
Mm.
इमेजरी जो है हर जगह यूज की जा रही है. अपर कास्ट यूथ जय भीम बोल रहा है. बट लाइक दिस लार्ज प्रोलिफरेशन, or politically this is where our movement is the weakest. Actually, our parties are not doing well and our leaders are not really showing up.
Mm.
So there is a very strange dichotomy, राइट.
Yeah.
बाबा साहेब जयंती में आप जाते हो तो मतलब 50 शहर में बहुत बड़ा बड़ा समारोह हो रहा है. नागपुर तो इज कम्प्लीटली टेकन ओवर. तो एक तरीके से
Yes.
पब्लिक स्पेस में बहुत बड़ा असर्शन हो रहा है, बट पॉलिटिकली स्पेस में agenda setting हम नहीं कर पा रहे हैं कहीं ना कहीं.
Mm.
So, and you have, I know you've spoken about this and on other platforms also, which is why I thought it would be very useful to talk to you, because आप उन कैरेक्टर्स में से हैं, आप उन उन शख्सियत में से हैं जो ये चेंज आपके आसपास हुआ है, because you've been
Mm.
very active and very at the center of it for almost 10-15 years now. And
Mm.
आपने मतलब many of these changes are a direct result of interventions of you and people around you. And so how do you see this, like where is the movement? And um, कहीं ना कहीं like इसमें grassroots का जो आप work कर रहे हो, like instead of
Yes.
pursuing a very conventional academic or a political career, both of which would have been very open to you,
Yes.
you're doing the hard work, you're going back to the community. So how do you see the movement, and how do you see your own role in this?
Yeah. Yes. No, this is something I guess for me and like many like me, this has become quite the everyday question to talk about. So let me put it this like in this way. Uh, Ravi, like if we look at what we call anti-caste movement, or let's say, and within the anti-caste movement, let's say the movements of the earlier untouchables, or now in the popular parlance we call Dalit. So when you go and like dig into the various aspect of this movement, I believe that in all the historical times, whether it's a bhakti movement, or like let's say after bhakti movement, Babasahab's movement, and then post Babasaheb, post Ambedkar movement. What I see that although there has been the cultural aspect of the movement, which has been very thick to the mobilization that we witnessed in the past. If you look at this movement, so let me like say that the every time the movement also is been like or the actors in the movement, they were addressing some kind of authority. Now let's say during bhakti movement, when you read the abhangas like from Chokha Mela, like many others saint from south and north. So there is the authority that they are addressing is something called a divine authority. Like Chokamela would say, in Pandarpur, in Vitthala's, in front of, outside the Vithala temple, that he would ask the Almighty, the God, the Vithala, that why this is so, why even after I being the the true bhakt, someone who does everything, and still that Vithala I am not allowed to touch you, to enter in your temple. So look at this thing, like during bhakti time, we our saints were addressing so-called the divine authority. And when there's the divine authority, I always say this thing, and let's say that was a complete the era of both culturally, materially, socially, politically, the era of the Brahmanism, that how even the king is supposed to be, would not be addressed by let's say some attainable traits, but by that how the divine authority, or let's say the Brahmin or the Brahminism, define that who can be the king. Like even in the Shivaji's time, like this popular episode that happened, that Shivaji was was not regarded as a Kshatriya, and therefore he cannot be the true king. Like so the divine authority here is basically giving the authority that who is what. Like, okay, so but after bhakti movement, we see this introduction of a colonial state, and let's say I must use the word the modern state, where the now the authority is not necessarily the immediate the divine authority, or or the divine state, which is the caste state. Okay, now we got a space where there is an alternative authority, which also has a superior power, which can overcome or which can basically surpass this local divine authority. And during colonial period, therefore, we were asking a different kind of question, not necessarily that why I am outside, but we were asking a question that I want to be inside, right? And therefore you see the temple entry movement, therefore you see the emergence of anti untouchability laws. And like in Vidarbha, there is a the labor movement, factory labor movement in of Dalits. Like in Vidarbha, those the mill workers were mostly from the Dalit community, and they were the first. If one looks into the history, even before the formation of any modern labor union, even before the formation of Communist Party, you know they were mostly Dalits who basically were asking the pertinent question to colonial master, that if you are saying these are the prescribed laws for the laborer, then where is our right? Right. So this, so this, this very idea of right, which is coming not from the, let's say, the divine authority or the Brahminical, and divine authority, when I'm referring, I'm referring here the Brahminical scripture, the Brahminical authority, the caste, the state, the caste state, the village authority, and all of that. Now, during colonial time, we were asking a different question. As I said, like Babasaheb, you see the Babasaheb negotiation with the Britishers. Like, that if you are ready to give the separate nation to Muslims, then what about us? Like, then we also want a separate electorate, separate settlement. This entire discussion, or the proposal that Babasaheb presented in the roundtable conference. Now, now after this, the post Ambedkar time, or let's say, post, so-called post independent India, we started asking a different question. Like, okay, now we like, for instance, Dalit Panther. the what Dalit Panther was basically saying, Dalit Panther was saying that, okay, now you are saying that you are a democracy, and you got a elected government and all of this, but even after this, even after your so-called democracy, what is our status? Is the democracy is good enough for us? Is your democracy the one who are basically ruling this country, the ruling government or ruling party, or even the opposition parties, so-called opposition parties? Dalit Panther was asking, if you look at this, the writings of Raja Dhale, or even for that matter, Dasa, they were asking this question that now, since you are so-called modern state, democratic state, you glorify your culture and all of this, where are we? Is your is your democracy, can your democracy respect us, can accommodate us as an equal citizen, right? And around that, when uh, and then we see there's a split in Republican Party of India, later Dalit Panther, all of this happens. And on the ground, then we see the emergence of a new kind of a movement. And that new movement basically, is kind of a departure from the old, old fashioned kind of, sporadic movement or assertion, which came into form of a Bamsef and later BSP. Now BSP, or let's say Bamsef, you know, now Bamsef, Dalit Panther, Bhakti movement, Babasaheb movement, as I was saying, that the on the one hand, there was a cultural aspect of this movement. On the other hand, as actually the way I was saying, that you look at, this material reality around it. How this the very political economy, or how the materiality around this reality is basically shaped our movement. Now, during Mamsef's time, we like, if not in very in bigger position, but after implementation of reservation for 2 decades or 1 decade, uh, uh, we witnessed the emergence of small a middle class who had the secure government job, maybe at the lower rank, clerk, or some small babus and all of that. So now, with that educated employed class, we could develop, the Pan India movement, which came, as I said, in the form of BAMSEF, which came up with this entire, the cultural understanding of Indian society through the Aryan and the non-Aryan binary. And we also then see that the emergence of BSP, with this very concept of Bahujan, and the ruling minority, the Brahmin, Baniya, and the other upper caste. And but now, like as you mentioned, now in the present time, the situation, both uh, in the political realm and also in the social and the cultural realm, we need to now ask what kind of questions we are asking. As I said, during from Bhakti to Babasaheb's time, during colonial time, and then post-colonial or the post-Ambedkar time, Dalit Panther, and then the Bamseb. Bamseb was basically, as I said, came up with this entire narration of the Bahujan, at pan India level, that there is something called the Bahujan as a community exists against the ruling upper caste minority. Now in this time, where when the Indian state basically once again has reduced us not as an equal citizen but somewhere as a merely as a welfare subject, right? Where now the government jobs we see those, I mean, like if you look at the numbers earlier, we had little bit more number of the people who were in the government jobs. Now when you don't have people in the government jobs, now you don't have people who has a secure the earning, and so from where now you're going to have that class who can give both the intellectual labor, the physical labor, and also the capital, the financial capital for a movement. Now in this situation, as I said, when there is a rapid privatization, when there is as you mentioned that your political parties are almost reduced to nothing. They are not even able to win one seat in general elections or even in the state election. So from now, like where we head from here, like from here, how we think हम लोग यहाँ से आगे कैसे बढ़े. So I believe that this is a time, like to more than to act. This is also the time to think. Before even to act, we need to think, and that thinking part somewhere I believe is missing, both in the intellectual space, our academicians, or the academicians coming from Savarna community who talk about Dalits and the movement and all of that. They are basically relying on the old method, either to basically speak about Baba Sahab, or or to study some phenomena, most of the cultural phenomena, and or let's say to basically to see this or just to understand this the so-called Dalit politics and all of that. But the thinking is not moving beyond that, like how in the present situation, when the materially we are into this place where, as I said, the rapid privatization, the emergence of new capitalists in India, and this and the withdrawal of a state, from our everyday life. So as I said, this is a time more than to act. This is a time to think first, and this thinking should involve, I believe, that the when we are basically when we are failed in the so-called electoral politics, that is this again a time to go back to the grassroots? Is this a time again to think that to basically understand what is happening at the ground? And therefore and when you look at the ground, like during my PhD, and I always say that post Ambedkar time, although our electoral politics has reduced, its significance has got reduced. But if you look at the post Ambedkar time, the grassroots movement or the grassroots leadership, which I call everyday leadership in a movement, that has basically got more stronger. However, this grassroots leadership or this grassroots mobilization does does not have the, let's say, if I put it in this way, the master. and the master not just in terms of leadership, but the master in terms of ideology also. Because every community or every mobilization, people believe or don't believe, people may believe that the knowledge should come from the below. I don't believe that. I think knowledge always comes as a bigger force. The ideology always comes as a encompassing, as a bigger meta narrative, which leads to the ground. Unfortunately, it is absent in let's say in popular Dalit movement now, where you see the grassroots mobilization, where you see the people are ready for a mobilization, but they do not have that master in terms of ideology, and also as a in terms of a leader who can basically basically channelize that aspect of everyday leadership and everyday movement. And like I'll just add one more point here, and then we can take we can just move from here. That as I said, like because we are talking most of these things in within the parameter or within the this larger umbrella of so-called democracy. And as we know that in this democracy, the politics becomes very, very, very important. But when your political parties are not doing well, then what should we do? You know. So so now once again I believe that the in recent time what we see in Dalit assertion or in Dalit movement or in Ambedkarite movement, we are mostly focusing on this cultural aspect of the movement. Like okay, and I also believe this question of representation itself has become the part of a cultural movement. Like what? For instance, like this: oh, you don't have a Dalit there. Oh, you don't have a tribe there. Now, for ruling class to negotiate with this kind of question becomes very easy. Now, for instance, to have a Dalit president, to have a Adivasi president, or to have even the Supreme Court judge, as a someone from Dalit community. So these are very the small negotiation that we are involved into. And as I said, these are mostly rooted into this cultural negotiation with the caste and the ruling caste. Rather, I believe that now the question, when your politics is not doing well, when you are not doing good in the electoral politics, now the question it should be like this: that if we are the citizen of this country, if we are a larger laboring force both in the rural and even in urban area, SC, and the OBCs, mostly the landless OBCs, then what is our negotiation with the state? Now, for instance, for any Bania here, like in India, that what is their negotiation with the state? Now, for instance, this entire now the recent the budget which came, that budget came with the anxiety that the middle class we might lose a middle class, and this middle class mostly we know that this comes from the upper caste, Brahmin, Baniya, and the other Savarnas. Now they always have a negotiation with the so-called Indian state. Okay, if you don't do this, we might go in this way. What is our negotiation with the so-called modern Indian state? Our negotiation is like this only, that you come and say Jai Bhim, or okay, you come and install Ambedkar statue, or you have one Dalit president, Dalit judge, or something like that. No, the negotiation should come with the real understanding and the question that as I said, like if we are a major laboring force in your agriculture economy and also in your so-called service economy, then what is our relationship with you? Where are our stakes in this so-called democracy? So and therefore I believe that now the movement should go a little beyond this cultural explanation and the cultural negotiation. And because as I said, cultural battle, we are somewhere we have compelled them to bend upon, like, or bend in front of our cultural questions. Like as I said, now even if you don't like Babasaheb, on your dinner table you might abuse Babasaheb, but once it's a compulsion for you when you come out to talk good thing about Babasaheb. That compulsion we have created. But beyond that compulsion, when it comes to the real movement, where as I said, like if you go to any city, like in major cities like Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, or any other city, this so-called cheap labor, which maintains your economy, which basically reduces so-called everyday service prior cost for this middle class, from your maid to your small the workers who are working in your small scale industries, like what you call MSCs and all of that. Who are these workers? You know, or even for that matter, when it comes to the question of a gender, where of like in the caste, Dalit women, Dalit question, most of this entire debate get reduced to the question of representation, or or like, if you look at it through another lens, the mostly the labor that has been used profoundly to produce the agricultural product, or even in urban economy, the labor of Dalit Adivasi and the lower OBC's women is much more. But that question of that economy, question of, when it comes to gender, or when it comes to, or even in general a movement, that is somewhere I believe is completely missing. It has not become the popular question. And the moment the moment you talk about this somehow, becomes, we have, I must say that somewhere we have produced or developed a disdain or contempt around this question. The moment you talk about this, you become automatically a Marxist. The moment you talk about this question, you automatically, basically somewhere find yourself in the isolation. And therefore, when we started ISCA and we started building this question, somewhere among our intellectuals, or even among the so-called the leaders that we have, for them, I don't think these questions are very important. It's just they think these are the small question. Yes.
Thank you. That was like a big range. So I had made some दो तीन चीजें इसमें which I would want you to comment on a little bit more. जो इससे निकल के आती है. One is one of the things that I really like about when you talk and when you consistently raise issues, you are constantly always talking about the question of capital
Yeah.
and connecting it to caste, which is, I think I agree with you, which is a ground that a lot of movement thinkers have just said, oh, this is a Marxist question, so left will talk about it. And the
Yes.
left thinkers are also very aggressively defending that terrain कि कास्ट और कैपिटल का कॉन्वर्सेशन होगा तो वही करेंगे, लाइक इस तरफ से नहीं
Yeah.
होगा, देयर इज
Yeah.
a push like that. So I'm very, like, I really like that. And I think you're probably the only person who is very aggressively constantly talking about private sector reservation, which
Yes.
is which goes back to what you were saying ki, like, it is really the labor of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, lower OBC labor,
Yeah.
and humko uska, we are not getting the benefit out of it. But I completely agree with you, and there are a couple of points I wanted to kind of go deeper on. Okay, I completely agree with you. This whole over cultural representation, I joke about it. Ke, like, ab lapata ladies will come. So one
Yes.
article will say, is it progressive? One article will say, is it not progressive?
Yes.
उसी के ऊपर discussion चल रहा है, and वो होना चाहिए, I guess. But I
Yes.
think somewhere that is an easier question to ask,
Yes.
okay, than saying ki, okay, now give us a job, right, or give
Yes.
us the profits, right.
Yes.
And I think you had written about this also in one of your articles, that you'll start hearing things like, it's not Brahmins, it's Brahminism.
Yeah.
Somewhere, like, when you start talking about caste, as you've said, now we made that place, okay, upper caste will also now talk about Babasaheb, right?
Yes.
So you will have like some friends who are all like, good Brahmin kayastha people. So then
Yes.
you can't say that it is Brahmins, then you'll say, oh, it's actually Brahminism and everything. So I
Yes.
think there is also, as I feel, as more and more of this cultural negotiation going on, it is making a lot of people within the movement ask easier questions,
Yeah.
dull down their rhetoric, dull down their demand a little bit. But
Yes.
conversely also, आपको कुछ रोल में वो एम्प करना पड़ेगा. You have to cry
Yes.
ज्यादा, आपको बिलखना पड़ेगा, आपको जाके रोना
Yes.
पड़ेगा, and you have to do that. So that
Yes.
performance they want peak. वहां जाके if you start talking about subtlety, then they don't like it. But
Yes.
if you start asking any serious questions, then that becomes a problem. So how do you see this? So, which is what I liked what you said. We should be asking what questions we are asking. It goes
Yes.
back to how knowledge gets produced. So how
Yes.
do you see that going and taking shape? Like, what should be the real questions? And like, I personally, मतलब मुझे थोड़ा uncomfortable लगता है how comfortable Savarnas have become with
Yes.
anti-caste movement, right? You should
Yes.
not be
Yes.
comfortable. It should be
Yes.
uncomfortable in that sense. So how do you see this negotiation kind of playing out? And like, how do we make sense of this constant urge to cultural representation? ये हो रहा है वो रहा है which जिसका अपना एक domain है, but it's also kind of opening the door for a lot of these things. How do you see that?
No, like your question also reminds me of what Ada Haran has written in her this banality of evil. When she explained this Nazi officer and she attends his prosecution and all of that, and she explained that he appears as a very ordinary person, ordinary man who is involving like he's doing his job the way one is supposed to do the job, eating, singing, going, having family, everything is normal. But at the same time, he is basically clearing a list of those who will, go to the death chambers, Nazi chambers and all of that. Now, for him, what is interesting in that particular text that what Anna Arendt explains, this easiness, with that, that inhuman, or like let's say that obscene act of inhumanity. So somewhere I believe that when this easiness, there are upper caste, like majorly upper caste basically goes with this easiness. Therefore, the unconscious, this automatic reproduction of everyday activities, where I know that somewhere some like the cleaner has or like the scavenger has died in the in shithole. So that does not so that, but still my everyday activity is so normal, because it is a, like, you may get disturbed, something this happen, like when atrocities are happening around us, we get disturbed, we get angry. But with the majorities of Brahmin Savarna, it's that does not even come as a register, because that is a, because the caste has become part of unconscious. So and then there are other upper castes who are like politically correct upper caste. Now this entire politically correct group, whether they are upper caste or white liberals or any people from the the ruling order, for them it is very important to have a guilt, because political correctness cannot you cannot consume it without a guilt. So, for instance, if I am, I have to be the good feminist. If I have to be, the champion of women's right, then I am also supposed to consume the guilt. And the guilt is this: oh, I'm a man. Then I'm a patriarch. And then because of me, you are in the bad position. All of that. So this entire political correctness then becomes, this the let's say this spiritualizing your own self, spiritualizing, and also somewhere purifying yourself, with the guilt. And as I said, guilt is very important in everyday life. Is also guilt is something very important. If I say you something very harsh, very bad, and if I have to readdress, or like if or like I have to live, I have to feel a guilt. If I do not feel guilt what I said, or so I will go into this realm of what Kant says, that the moral failing. So I don't want to go into this realm of I don't want to fail myself. I don't want to morally fail myself, and therefore this guilt becomes very important. And this and as I said, therefore the question of caste does not becomes the question which is the part of a normal or outside there. Maybe you are an upper caste, a Brahmin, you don't practice a caste, but this is not how the caste is all about. Oh, I sit with Dalits. Oh, I eat with them. Oh, like I am even married to Dalit, or like all these questions, or I've been talking about the caste issues and things. So the Brahminism is not about Brahmins or the upper caste. The Brahminism is something. But yes, but when you say that, what basically you are basically trying to undermine the fact that the individual, my recognition within society does not necessarily come from by my own. I always want that significant other who recognize me, right? And in that recognition, you reproduce the structure. Now, for me, being a male, good to my partner or good to women around me, as I always say, does not change anything for them except the momentary thing, or those that minute, or the small space that we share. Outside there, the things are same. The structure is getting reproduced. So ultimately, which helps me to grow, to to basically expand myself. So therefore, question of a caste is not simply the question of this mere. It's not the question of this. It's not a spiritual question that now I don't practice. I'm a Brahmin, therefore I am not. I am this casteless Brahmin, or all of that nonsense, right? It doesn't exist. Like for instance, if there is a capitalism, and if there is so-called good capitalist, can we come to the conclusion that capitalism is not about capitalism, but capitalism is about the capitalism as a system? You can't say that, because if I'm a capitalist, I'm part of that larger capitalism, whether I want it or not, no, that structure will produce something for me where I can survive very easily, right? And therefore I believe that this question of that the Brahminism can survive without Brahmin or upper caste. I don't believe that. No structure is not there. Like what the structure means. Maybe many times it's not tangibly available, but it is tangible in its own sense. And who make it tangible? The people who hold that structure, like people who get benefit out of that structure, unconsciously, or let's say automatically. I get the help or the support of patriarchy without me putting individual effort into it, right? So
No, that's a fantastic point that you're saying, and I think um, like this whole idea about like I'm a good person, I'm a bad person,
yeah,
like it, you're never one step removed. Like आपके WhatsApp ग्रुप में ही आपको 3 लोग मिल जाएंगे जो
yeah,
बहुत ही problematic है, right? आपके family में, so you're still part of the structure. But I think the question that I kind of also want, because it's a question I also kind of want to figure out and think about, कि you're very right when you say कि like caste is not a spiritual question, it's rooted in material reality. तो आप material बात करो क्या है नहीं है, right? And
इन
any
गुजराती
political
धंधे की
party,
बात
हाँ जी,
इन गुजराती लाइक धंधे की बात कर भाई.
yes, yes, yes. See the, but I remember I was invited for one panel discussion कहीं इसी इंस्टीट्यूट में. मैंने उनको बोला था मैं यहाँ आकर अपने नसें भी काट लूंगा ना, एक्चुअली आपका इवेंट हिट हो जाएगा, दैट्स व्हाट यू वांट, बट यू
Yeah,
विल नॉट गिव मी अ जॉब हियर बिकॉज देन आई विल बिकम योर कॉलीग. दैट्स अ
yeah,
प्रॉब्लम, राइट?
yeah,
सो इट्स वेरी मटीरियली रूटेड. एंड जब आपको बुलाया जाता है एज अ गेस्ट या एज अ समथिंग, दे आर एक्चुअली लाइक यू सेड प्यूरिफाइंग देमसेल्व्स, बिकॉज वो
yeah,
गिल्ट का मार्केट है. एंड आई रिमेंबर लाइक व्हेन आई फर्स्ट स्टार्टेड टॉकिंग ऑनलाइन, ऐसे ये सवर्णा फेमिनिस्ट आते थे मेरे पास, विमेन, और वो फिर नेगोशिएट करते थे कि देखो आप कास्ट से ऑपरेस्ड हो, मैं जेंडर से ऑपरेस्ड हूँ. And then like that kind of a conversation would, and then I would always say yeah, but like you're still having all the caste privilege. Despite the intersectionality is not just intersectional operation, there's also intersectional privilege,
yes,
वो भी आपको मिल रहा है, right? But the question that I have is कि अब within the movement, like thanks to post colonial India constitution and जितना भी रोध होके रिजर्वेशन के अगेंस्ट में इम्प्लीमेंटेशन हुआ है, एक छोटा सेक्शन, वन स्मॉल लेयर हैज emerged of second generation people from community who have come up. माँ बाप ने बहुत स्ट्रगल किया है, सो द इम्पल्स इज टू सेव द चाइल्ड फ्रॉम द डायरेक्ट हॉरर्स ऑफ कास्ट, राइट? So you will put them in good schools, you will put them in good institutions, and sometimes somehow what happens is when they come out on the other side, the very vocabulary of the question changes then, right? So I think the black movement also has this issue, like how do you deal with affluent black people? And I think their movement has responded very well, like they still keep the vocabulary very tight. But yahan par I feel sometimes that the whole question starts getting very savarna washed,
mm,
right? वो हर चीज में like without realizing or consciously realizing, I don't know, they start talking about caste in very like a savarna person is talking,
mm,
but it's coming from this person. जो नेचुरली एक रिजल्ट हुआ है जब आपको उस टाइप के इंटरनेशनल स्कूल में डाला जाएगा, उस टाइप के कॉलेज में डाला जाएगा, आप अर्बन हो, इंग्लिश स्पीकिंग हो, ठीक है, तो आप वहीं पर आ रहे हो. हाउ डू वी गेट, हाउ डज अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ आइडेंटिटी एंड एंगेजमेंट कम फ्रॉम दैट पर्सन जो ऑलरेडी इस सेकेंड जनरेशन पाइपलाइन में है एंड इन मेनी विच वेज आर being consumed by upper caste for their guilt. Okay, this is my, very talented Dalit friend, and he's like artist, or she's some designer or something like that, and that becomes part of their identity in that formation, right? So how do you see that? Like what like movement also has to kind of make space for that question, like, what happens to those people, because they end up becoming the main people that upper caste will pick to ab tum caste pe baat karo, in that sense. So how do you see that whole phenomenon play out?
So that with this, this tiny, middle class or upper middle
Because I,
class.
I sorry, I'll just add one more point. The reason I'm asking you this is a lot of these places where people like us go actually are open because of people like you. ये आपने जाके मतलब हड़काया है, वो position create की है, that upper caste now will be like, let's do a panel discussion on caste. But in that panel discussion, Dr. Rahul Sonpimple will not be called, will somebody else will be called who will be slightly
Yes.
more comfortable. That's why
Yeah.
I'm asking you, how do you think about this?
No, I think this, like, because most of this, this new generational, discourse around identity, I believe that they mostly draw from this post-ideological, search for identity, which mostly come from this Western university department, this post-colonial studies and the gender department and all of this, which basically were established against the working class Marxist philosophy. In the West, if you look their history, most of this department, this African study, from gender studies to all these post-colonial studies, were mostly against established, were against the Marxist discourse. Now, like, as I said, like, as this post ideological, or let's say this so-called post, there is nothing called postmodern, but this post ideological discourse, which gives the individual the burden to find his uh, or her own truth. So now the truth does not exist outside. The truth is not this overarching structure, but the truth somewhere, lies into you, and now you have to find that truth, or let's say the identity of your own. And this somehow gives this space, for individual, even for the marginalized community, to basically search that truth individually, you know and therefore and when you do not find that correct the identity within the community, because community is dealing with the everyday question, which goes with the overarching structure, the question of bread, butter, and all of that. Now, the representation of my discontent, which which comes through this constant identity search or the recognition by other, then ends up into this larger post ideological discourse of identity, which then identify, gives you identity, like, with this political correctness. Oh, you're Dalit. Oh, I'm supposed to shut up and listen you now. Or you speak. I'm now fine. Now here they find that space, right? And now, like, let's say the Instagram, for that matter, like, you write something, and then there are people who will come and support you in a way of, with your identity, that you affirm your identity, because structure, according to them out there, basically is there to dislodge, the identity that they want to retain. And therefore this new generation of Dalit, upper middle class or middle class, or even from OBCs or Adivasis, for them, more than community itself that they claim to be representing, the real significant other from there, from where they, basically derive the affirmation, is not the community that they belong, but it is this politically correct group that they are involved into, you know and therefore there is no root. So for instance, even this, like, as I said, like, this coming out something, is basically not necessarily to tell larger society that, I am coming out, but it's basically to receive this affirmation from this tangible politically correct group, which is the part of your media, which is the part of your, let's say, the publishing industry, or the cultural industry, and this entire group. And yes, as you said, therefore for them also, this question, the real question, for instance, if you ask about, you don't see much people talking about, they talk about gender, but you miss to talk about that how within this gender, like, or let's say, the question of intersectionality would come. Oh, you are oppressed by caste, I'm oppressed by gender. Or you are oppressed, you're Dalit women, you're oppressed, there are multiple oppression of you. I am upper caste women, I may face the two kind of oppression. Or if it is about identity, I can write the 100 oppression that I face. Okay, every individual can sit and write, even the Brahmin. And why not? Even the Brahmin women can write, and that's a truth. The Brahmin women can write how she faces patriarchy. Isn't it truth? It is a truth. But the fact again for me is not what she faces, and not that I'm insensitive. But my point is this: that when there's a structure which operates the entire community. Now, for instance, I always say caste in traditional sense, like unlike this feminist discourse, which basically divides between the private and the public. If you look at the caste always has to perform in the public. So I'm a Brahmin. If I'm practicing Brahminism within my house, this is not how the caste function. I'm a Brahmin. When I come out, I'm supposed to regulate that who drinks. क्या आप पानी कहाँ से पी रहे हो, कि आपकी मूछ आपने रखी है कि नहीं रही है रखी है, आप अगर औरत हो, दलित औरत हो, तो आपने कैसे कपड़े पहने, all of that. So caste is about this minute regulation in the public, and therefore historically the caste has been reproduced more in its public performance out there by controlling resources, by controlling the space. And and therefore for me, what that Brahmin woman is, if she is oppressed by the Brahmin man, is not. And I'm okay. Let me put it very clearly. I am not concerned about it much. I'm concerned more about my women. My sister, my daughter, who are born, born into that community, who are living in slum, in the villages. So therefore, this for me, that intersectionality doesn't exist in a way of how the system is getting reproduced. You know, so and therefore the question there is not about for them at the ground. The question is not about recognition by that political correct master, or let's say for this post-colonial school. Although they talk about against colonialism, but at the end, if you look at minutely, the entire post-colonial school, mostly from this American, upper caste, Bengali upper caste, it's at the end this white daddy who has to be, and most of these centers are also being run by this, big corporate funding and all of that in these universities. So somewhere this white daddy's recognition is very important for them, right? So and here also with this small minute these individuals from lower caste, for them also the question is not the overarching structure, because in the overarching structure one has to live with with the objective social fact, what Durkheim says, the social fact, the objective reality, that there is us and there is they. Because for oppressor or the system always get reproduced by otherizing. The otherization is very important, because we have been otherized. Now if I have been otherized, I can only rise by creating this clear binary between they and us. And when I create the binary between they and us, then there is not simply the ruling class man, but there is also ruling class woman, right? So therefore, this intersectionality of your operation is multiple time and mine is like little bit less, but still we can have an intersection. I don't think this is any change can come along like this. The change always comes from the oppressed section when they identify their enemy very clearly. There is no blur into it, right? However, this post-ideological discourse, more than clarity, it basically blurs the reality. And therefore, the words that they use mostly this complicit. The women, upper caste women or the ruling class women is also complicit. No, she is not simply complicit. She is a part of it. She is not simply the complicit in the problem. She is the problem. The man is the problem. Her man is the problem. She is also the problem. And therefore, for any oppressed community who is being oppressed by that, but and as I said, that the system is not just about this it's not in isolation. It's the people who run it. And now, fortunately or unfortunately, it is become very very clear that how now this the re-emergence of this right wing parties and the right wing masters like Trump and in the West and other countries where things are becoming quite clear that okay, for all this year we pretended to be believing in so-called diversity and all of that, but now once again we the mask, this is what we can say in the like in the psychoanalysis they say this return of the repressed. So maximum this this diversity, okay, I can accept you. It's not just acceptance, so it was also the repression which helped them economically. But now if that repression is not helping them very much, so they don't want to have this nonsense of diversity, but they want to be very clear, right? Okay, so therefore I believe that most of this discourse, this diversity discourse, this intersectionality discourse, most of these discourse are the post-ideological discourse, somewhere even been influenced by these ruling classes, where you do not find your enemy very clearly, right? And therefore and why if I am somewhere doing good in my life, I don't want to find that clear enemy as a, let's say in the Marxist terms, the class enemy, you know if there is no class enemy, then what is there? Then there is this simply discontent with the system, and that discontent is like this again, finding your identity. Oh, okay, now pass the mic. you know like okay, now okay, mic pass कर लिया, अभी क्या? Oh, I want to
I
tell
hope.
my story. हाँ, मैं like सुन लिया आपकी story, अभी क्या? Well, I don't believe, I don't give a damn about people listening my story. I give damn about, like for instance, if if you're in your urban economy, if it's my people who are contributing in your this informal economy, maintaining your so-called city order, I want to believe that, I want to ask, where is the mobility for these people? Like the capitalism promised that this will help us to get the so-called mobility. But if you look at the data tells us that there is no mobility from up to the low, from lower to the upper strata, right? It's rather these upper stratas have mobilized themselves more and more, right? So I believe somewhere these are the real question which, as you also said, makes you uncomfortable for the system. It makes the system uncomfortable, and why does this liberal upper caste, even in the right wing upper caste, they can become a liberal, they can perform this political correctness so well, that they can say, oh, Rahul, yeah, I know that the caste untouchability, and I'm so this is that, and therefore I wanted you to talk about this, all of that. I or they can ask any other Dalit. So this becomes very very easy. Yes, I don't know if I'm repeating Ravi again and again, but yes,
No, no, I think you made some very interesting point, and I hope, like, the audience goes back and re-listens to this part, because it's so nuanced, but it's so clear also जब आप बोल रहे हो कि liberal और right wing के लिए, दोनों के लिए it's so easy to
yeah,
perform.
yeah,
हाँ, अभी 2 हफ्ते पहले बीजेपी and Congress are fighting with each other who is more respecting Baba Sahib. Like, this is
yeah,
the discourse in the parliament now. And when we make it performative, like I always say that caste is a very performative system, which is what you're also saying. So आप बोल रहे हो, जब आपने उसको पोस्ट आइडियोलॉजिकल आइडेंटिटी सर्च में आपने डाल दिया है, then every transcendence becomes a personal journey,
yes,
which is
yes,
what I also see a lot of discussion on caste, कि मैंने ये स्ट्रगल किया और ये मेरी
ah,
जर्नी है, और उसी को
yes,
बहुत सेलिब्रेट किया जा रहा है. बट
yes,
the journey is not, we've not come this far individually, we've come a community.
yes,
पूरा एक कम्युनिटी बैठ के एक विहार बनाया है, या एक बाबा साहेब
yes,
का स्टैचू खड़ा किया है, उसमें
yes.
कितने लोगों का, कितने सालों का कंट्रीब्यूशन है,
You just
शायद
just
हमको
believe
समझ में भी
when
नहीं आएगा. हाँ.
when there is a when the community decides that they want to celebrate Ambedkar Jayanti in the village. Do these casteist lords or these casteist bigots, do they attack individually, or they burn the entire the community houses? So now what is happening here? Here even these post ideological Dalits, or let's say so-called lower caste individual who are dwelling into these so-called post-ideological spaces, and mostly the university for and the social science department and humanities, all of that. For them also, for them, what has become a bigger task to prove that they are authentic subjects for even the consumption for a masters, for the upper caste or the white master there in the US or in India also, is basically also to criminalize your own community first. So let's assume, like, let's say that how I am also being tortured by my community, like, because here is always this popular thing, na, that like, oh, society is evil, and therefore I as an individual basically find a liberation into my own self, finding truth into myself. And in this popular realm of this as I said, into the recognition, in this largely you see these accounts of this personal account, and therefore these biographies, autobiographies are mostly consumed by this liberal upper caste or whites. The reason is of that consumption is also this, or it get popularized. And the reason is also this, as I said, like, there you also see this criminalization of a community, the community who even struggle to drink water from the public tank, and they did all this struggle. Not some individual did not do that struggle. That struggle came from the collective. Okay, now here the entire discourse has become the discourse of subjectivities. Okay, so therefore this Dalit subjectivity. What the hell is Dalit subjectivity? I mean, if this is the subjectivity that is completely rooted into the system, and therefore, and if one has to be subjective enough, let's say if I am writing my autobiography, I need to be true to my own self, which I will never be. For instance, I always say the autobiographer always write what world has done wrong to them, but they will never dare to go into the realm what they have done wrong to the others, right? Because subjectivity is not just about the that you are explaining what is there in what people have done wrong to them, but subjectivity also take you into the minute detail where you obscenely unravels your own self, and obscenely unraveling yourself and accepting that it is a bigger task. So autobiographies are not a true account, I always say. Mostly this English, now this for consumption, this either there is autobiography or any other autobiography is good for upper caste to read, sit at the house, and then discuss, or for any this liberal art department to basically discuss that book. And then for instance, मौत होने के बाद आप 2 मिनट का मौन रखते हो, वैसे एवरीडे लाइफ में आपको थोड़ा देर के लिए तो गिल्टी होना चाहिए, क्योंकि अगर वो थोड़ा देर आप गिल्टी नहीं रहोगे लाइफ में, तो इट इज you cannot have your regular cognitive order in a place. To have my cognitive order in the place, I need to have a guilt about something or either into my immediate sphere or like somewhere there. And for that, you need an authentic subject. And to become authentic subject, Dalit has to articulate their subjectivity, and therefore it is being presented as a commodity. It is a part of a commodity. And rather, and therefore, as I said, the bigger question of this economic negotiation, that what the Indian, how the Indian state treat us. Therefore, you don't see the land rights movement anymore. Therefore, you don't see the Dalits, although they're part of largely this, the urban economy, because they provide the cheap labor. You don't find, the larger collective mobilization at the ground, that either, this domestic worker or the factory worker, they are all becomes, this, their, rather that those collective mobilization has become the scrutiny for this post-ideological scholar to look into that and see, oh, how they did that, how that movement is masculine, or how that entire thing is, like, it's a hilarious. I'll just finish this thing. I was in JNU, and one of these professor, Dalit professor, who always, busy into basically making happy upper caste, who showed the documentary movie, this pantry movie. And in the last, when Jabba basically throw the stone to this person, and the director very minutely like basically presented that how he's throwing the stone, and that in act of Jabba throwing the stone, or basically opposing that the village upper caste, was also been tried to understand through this, how he was masculine, how his act was like masculine. And it was discussed for half an hour, or let's say, around 1 hour. And I was amazed to see like how this entire post-ideological discourse, which comes around nowadays, caste, gender, and femininity and masculinity, how they basically somehow have produced this disdain for the real act, and that real act, when I'm referring the real act, it also involves the militant act into it. But somewhere that militant act itself has been now be presented as, through this lens, like whether it's masculine or whether it's feminine, and all of that. And this is troublesome. This has to, in large, and like I don't think even these people are, like they have any they have become the custodian of our movement to represent, because they are the one who are dwelling into this university departments. They are the one who are getting benefit of these scholarships, fellowship, or all of that, right? And as I said, for them it becomes very important to their work. And I can give you writing, no Dalit writer, like most of the publishing houses or even the journal, you see that Dalit writings get accepted mostly into academic sphere when they involve the subjective experience of being Dalit. There are rare writings or the rare Dalit intellectual whose writing has been accepted as a theoretical one, where I myself does not get involved into as a subject, but I somehow theorize something, right? So this is not how you have been accepted. You will be accepted only when you write about your experiences, or you write something about, or you want to theorize, but you can only theorize when you involve your subjective experiences into it. So yes.
No, that's actually a very fantastic point. I think one more layer to this I will also add. Okay, is my audio clear? There's Azan
Yes,
going
yes,
on.
yes,
So
yes,
okay,
yes.
great. So one of the things that becomes a problem, मतलब जो मैंने देखा भी है कि इन दिस परफॉर्मेटिव स्पेस ना, वो एक जगह खोलेगा आपके लिए. दे विल नेवर गिव
Mm.
द रूम टू यू, बट दे विल ओपन वन स्पेस. अब हम 5 लोग या हम 10 लोग, वी आर फाइटिंग फॉर दैट वन स्पॉट,
Yes.
right? So in that spot, if I want to go in and I don't want Dr. Rahul Sonpimple to go in, I have to delegitimize you. तो कहीं ना कहीं अपर कास्ट क्या
Yeah.
कर रहा है, लॉट ऑफ दी सवर्णा एकेडमिक्स एंड इंटेलेक्ट, they will use me to say nasty things about you, they will use you to say
Mm.
nasty things about somebody else, and
Mm.
kahin na kahin there is a caste catharsis happening. So they are
Mm.
not saying it. Like
Mm.
as an academic, like I sometimes get like these WhatsApp messages from like upper caste scholars. Okay,
Mm.
they will go work with some professor who's like Ambedkarite, एंड किसी ने मेरा कोई ट्वीट देखा है, कुछ क्रिटिक किया है, and they are
Mm.
sending me screenshot, they are saying this about you, what do you think, am I getting it?
Mm.
और मेरा एक स्टैंडर्ड रिस्पॉन्स है विद अपर कास्ट, आई डोंट रिस्पॉन्ड टू यू, आई विल बी लाइक नहीं नहीं दे आर वेरी गुड एंड एवरीथिंग. बट आई वंडर इफ दैट पर्सन इवन नोज कि
Mm.
आपसे ये पूछा जा रहा है.
Mm.
उसने हो सकता है अपने तरफ से वॉलंटरी भी नहीं बोला होगा, उसको
Mm.
जाके पूछा होगा, देखो रविकांत ने ऐसा बोला, व्हाट डू यू थिंक, नाउ यू विल से समथिंग, नाउ ही विल दे विल कम एंड ब्रिंग इट, एंड
Mm.
दे आर डूइंग दिस इनोसेंटली. क्योंकि कहीं
Yeah.
ना कहीं उनको कास्ट कथारसिस चाहिए, उनको देखना
Mm.
है कि ये डिस्कशन कि मैं नहीं बोल सकती या मैं नहीं बोल सकता, इफ आई स्टार्ट क्रिटिकिंग एज अ चैटर्जी और समबडी, देन बोथ ऑफ यू विल बीट मी, सो आई विल
Mm.
स्टार्ट डूइंग दिस. सो कहीं ना कहीं इन दिस परफॉर्मेंस of
Mm.
me trying to say I am an authentic subject, and then somebody will say no, I am more authentic subject, मेरी
Mm.
इतनी कहानी है नहीं, मेरी इससे भी ज्यादा कहानी है.
Mm.
And in that space when they pit us against each other, I think the Savarna academic is also having some caste catharsis in
Mm.
seeing this viciousness play out. And there is
Mm.
viciousness also which comes with this. And I'm
Mm.
glad that आपने university का point बोला, because that's one of the discussion points that we had, because um, this is a place where it is getting reproduced, this whole liberal
Mm.
arts private university space, जिसके बारे में I've actually not seen any discussion.
Mm.
Most of the discussion is still about few central state universities जहां पर Ambedkarite student groups have come. And like the audience may not know this or may not remember this, because many are
Mm.
just falling into this discourse. Rahul Bhai is one of the first people who really built this, like one of the first critics of Kanhaiya Kumar and all. तो
Mm.
हम उस टाइम में देखा करते थे, like you had been saying, like it has kind of played itself out
mm,
the way
mm,
you had kind of said in 2016 2017 आप तब से बोल रहे हो. And kahin na kahin, this whole idea of an Ambedkarite student union as a negotiation against
mm,
that idea now in 24-25, how much does it hold water? Does it work, especially in a system जहां पर material reality of higher education has changed?
mm,
45% आपका यूनिवर्सिटी प्राइवेट हो गया है, कोई रिजर्वेशन दे नहीं रहा है. And I'm also saying, whenever I meet like young Ambedkarite scholars, ASA, BAPSA, कोई भी हो, I always tell them I worry for you, because I've
mm,
seen so many of these very powerful vocal student leaders. They're all struggling for academic job.
mm,
आप कहीं भी अप्लाई करते हो, आपका कोई पुराना यूट्यूब क्लिप ले आएगा.
mm,
It is a very difficult position. So on campus, upper caste is forcing you to be political. If
mm,
you go in a university and you don't want to say too much, they'll be like, oh, you're depoliticizing.
mm.
But when you're political, you go into the job market of academia and civil society, then you're not getting it. So in this space, as one of the pioneering voices of the Ambedkarite student movement, like, how do you see this play out?
No, I see this. I mean, I believe that the see university itself, like for instance, I always say this. अगर विदर्भ में अगर जेएनयू जैसा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर वाला कोई यूनिवर्सिटी होता जिसमें उतना उसको फंडिंग मिलता और उतना बढ़िया से वो रहता तो मैं दिल्ली कभी नहीं जाता. Like so like we always know these so called premier institutions and their politics itself has been very oppressive in the nature, that you will have one central university in Delhi, like JNU or other places where you will have more resources, but you will have no such university in Gadchiroli, where you will have no such university in Dantewada, or the tribal area which is been mostly discussed. Okay, so so yes, when I personally, when I entered, like the university, in these spaces, so I somehow found like on the other side, like like even if you are not active in so-called student politics or there, even into academics, that the Dalit scholars has to there also you will not be seen as a normal, you know, either you are either you are timid, or you are extra assertive, right? There is nothing normal that even exists in your even your academic writing. As I said, in the previous question that the Dalit also always has to perform something. Like for instance, you must have watched this Dhaka, the movie that came, Sonakshi Sinha, and the based on Rajasthan story. She is Dalit and all of that. So Dalit cannot be normal coming, going to office. As I said, the ordinary he cannot be or she cannot be the ordinary one, right? In the university, either you are very you are a subaltern in very in classical sense, like when where you are timid, or you are just nowhere, or either you have to perform extra to basically get noticed, right? And this getting noticed within this university space therefore needs a lot of assertion. And somehow we most of the students, just to make their politics to get recognized, they have to perform have to do a lot of extra things, and in this doing extra things, most of the times, uh, this, the structure does not help you. Like for instance, not just in case of me or Babsa in JNU, but also in the case of Ambedkar Student Association in SCU for that matter, right? So the entire world, or even the upper middle class Dalit also noticed that Dalit exists in the university when Rohit committed suicide, or his institutionalized murder made everyone to realize the movement around it made everyone to realize, or to basically create a space in their mind and their everyday life, the space of acceptance, right? And I believe this extreme performativity, either you kill yourself, or either you basically like do something, as I said, extra, like you but for upper castes, or let's say for these left liberals or even for right wing upper caste, this activism in the campuses is an ordinary thing, right? It's, it's a part of their life. It is, this is how, like they say, na, like if you are young and you are not a Marxist, so you have not lived your life. So this phrase also basically this works also as a commodity.
It's
Like,
personality development.
yes, like, if you're a part of a university and if you have not acted revolutionary, then there is no surplus in your life, right? Because activism in their, or like let's say this left liberal binary or all of that, this is a common thing for them. Okay, they know it. Now there is something surplus that they always want, and that surplus they want to consume, and therefore that's how that. But for us, the activism was not a surplus. The activism was a minimum thing for us to basically ask the very pertinent, very everyday kind of question. The question of discrimination in interviews, the question of caste untouchability practice in hostels, or the humiliation that our students face from their faculties, from their fellow beings. So these are not question of a surplus. These are the question of the basic struggle to get recognized as an equal human being within the campus life, right? So as like I don't know like how exactly I am answering your question, but uh, I believe that this university space, as you said, also then becomes a site for Dalits on the one hand to prove themselves. On the other hand, after once they go outside there is no concrete structure that exists for them. There is no social capital, there is no social network. And even there is faculties who are already in the universities, we know that their condition is also not that good. They are also very timid. Most of them are very timid. They, and therefore they have to, they, like for instance, I know one of a professor who told, indirectly was telling me that if he takes a Dalit student as his student, or supervise him, then so basically it will look like that, oh, I am like pro to my caste or pro to my people, and therefore I consciously choose to take upper caste student. So this burden to perform, this burden to prove yourself is a lifelong burden within these campus spaces for others. And therefore you don't have a outside network or outside structure who can protect you. So once you are outside the university, as you said, you have they have their video clips or your Facebook status or so and so on. So it becomes easy for them. But what my worry is this, like, what they want to do, they are anyway doing. What are these our people who are into academics, small or bigger spaces? Have they created this, at least some space for our younger students? Where if I know that you are not in a position where you can offer them a good job or job for that matter, there are very few who can do that. But even a space where you can create a support system for them. So within these university spaces, Dalits or Adivasi or OBC, even faculties who are conscious enough or who are writing about these issues, I believe that they are also equally, the part of a problem, right? Because they don't dare ever. They also only talk about caste or come openly when there are suicides. Like in IIT, the Solanki, the young boy committed suicide, or Rohit Vimala suicide, but not the suicide, but the movement after that. And when I'm saying that they're part of a problem, not necessarily I'm saying that they are the originate they're originating the problem. No, they are not the one who are basically creating the problem. The problem is there. It goes that how upper caste is basically retain the system or have the monopoly over the system. But my point is this, that that me being Dalit or part of any institution, when talk about our issues, and I simply, then on the other hand, I do not create a system for the students like me, who come from this rural or come from very poor background, and they take part in the university activism, and if I do not create a support system for them, then believe me, if there is any suicide because of discrimination of any Dalit faculty in campuses, even like JNU, there will be no one for even for the Dalit faculties to talk about their agony. because faculties, they are very timid, and I can see it on their face, that majority of Dalit faculties in the university campuses, they are same like these bureaucrats who are also very timid, very, want to, or the corporate employees want to keep, like, want to have so called, everyday life to go on, hide things and all of that. They're equally same. So the activism for Dalit students, mostly I'm saying Dalit students or the poor, and apparently I have seen in JNU, also in SCU, most of the students who do the activism are also the students who come from the working class background. They are not some this middle class or upper, very few who will get involved, right? Because most of them have seen experience, that agony, that, or let's say even their stories are quite common. Like when in Bapsa, when we were doing activism, majority of us had a common story to share. No one were devoid from some so-called reality, right? So we could form a very stronger bond also to fight against the discriminative practices that exist in the university campus. Again, I don't know if I'm answering your, or like I'm on the point.
No, I think like in the interest of time, I would have liked a little bit more to do follow up, but I there is one important question which I cannot like step out without can't have you comment on it. So the student engagement movement, I think we can talk about it, but I think that point about professors in the university system is very well taken. I completely share your assessment. Most Ambedkarite professors or people who say that their institutional footprint agency बहुत कम है और एक्चुअली में उनके
Yes,
पास मतलब जितनी उनके पास एजेंसी कम है और उससे उससे भी कम वो एक्सरसाइज करते हैं जनरली
yes,
स्पीकिंग सो दे
yes.
प्ले वेरी वेरी सेफ
There's
एंड
a
दे
fear for
reproduce
them also. No?
yeah they reproduce the same language to fit in.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
very different world in that sense. Corporate I think is far more inclusive than academia
yeah.
is.
I must say that.
uh,
Yeah, I must say. Yeah.
but the thing that I really do want to kind of also ask and kind of go full circle back to where we started. I wanted to kind of also understand from you, how do you think of the word Bahujan, and does it create like a space? Because you're also the founder, president of. You very deliberately have also used schedule caste,
Yes.
in the framing of it. And you when you talk about the politics, you're not talking about Bahujan politics. You very
Mm.
clearly talk about schedule caste as such. When I first started reading and engaging, there is a sort of a naive idealism, maybe I say ha Bahujan and this thing. But I think even as an OBC person, as I've gone deeper into it, अब अगर कोई मेरे सामने डीबीए बोलता है या बहुजन बोलता है तो मेरे को immediately I start feeling a little like what's going on here. Because I think personally my reading has been that these are very different movements. I think connecting OBC to ST to SC is may have been a political idea, but it doesn't kind of like engage at least academics may or civil society may, so I can't see it. But as somebody again who's very much been at the front lines of this for a very long time, आपने ये पॉलिटिकल एक्सपेरिमेंट देखे हैं, पॉलिटिक्स में देखे हैं, एकेडमिया में देखे हैं. How do you think about or theorize about the relevancy of this Bahujan identity? I think that would be very useful. I only now see it being very actively used by savarnas, or very savarna type oriented circles में बहुत ज़्यादा यूज होता है. बट जहाँ जहाँ भी मैंने भी फील्ड वर्क किया है, nobody actually uses the word Bahujan unless they're associated with BSP या काम कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि वो उनका political vocabulary है. But how do you see this, and as somebody who's setting up a grassroots organization, actively engaging with the community, intellectual in your own right? You write so much, you write so much. So as a, like you said, this is also a time in the movement where we need to think, not just
Mm.
action. So how do
Mm.
we think about Bahujan? Is something that I would love to hear from you.
Yeah. No, no, it's very good that you asked me, and I actually, like this word Bahujan, but I like it with my own, with my own limitations, that I find both in its implementation and also its, its association that the people have formed around this. So you see, like, this very word Bahujan, which got more popular, or popular, it got popularized by the spread and the emergence of Babasaheb and later BSP. Uh, uh, and we know that the word basically, more than, I believe that the word Bahujan should have become the cultural term more than the political one. It should have, become the cultural one, which basically, kind of comes with this utopian idea that the, we, all the, SC, ST, OBCs also include the landed community, that they can come together and form this larger umbrella of Bahujan against the Brahmin, Savarna, minority, the ruling minority, the ruling caste minority. Politically, this appeared or appealed also, if not completely, but at least in some sense in UP, for that matter. But like in Maharashtra, the word Bahujan, that when I started, understanding this through the lens of a movement, as you also mentioned, I believe that, this, more than in North India, this term Maharashtra, in the word Bahujan in Maharashtra, has more social and the cultural, aspect of it than, the political necessarily. That they may vote differently to different parties, but the word somewhere is not just, the political, but also, as I said, has a social base where, Phule becomes very important, and, this uh, these other OBCs becomes very important. Now, why I'm saying this, also to highlight the point, or to bring this discussion very clearly here, that the Bamsip's Bahujan was kind of, also the, the unrealistic, in sociological sense, it was unrealistic Bahujan, who simply for the to form a political majority would you would use the word Bahujan, and also then allowing the dominant caste, group to become the part of Bahujan. And as we know that the history of India, of any particular community, one can go on and go on to basically dig into the history and prove someone that how one is a Bahujan. So for instance, if some community in the present time, for instance, the Kammas in Andhra and Telangana, if you find their histories, obviously they are not Brahmins. Somewhere they were Shudras and all of that. But now, and therefore now the burden is on the lowest of the low, landless labor Dalit, to basically prove, or basically get convince that Kamma to, accept the Bahujan identity and then become the part of a movement. This is not how it is going to work. Therefore, the very term Bahujan has to be localized in other way. Where I always say that the ideology which basically does not basically demark that who are your caste here in India, the caste enemies and the class enemies. So then only this terminology Bahujan can gain a real, momentum. As I said, like, in the larger umbrella of Bahujan, in the Kammas, Reddis, or even Marathas and the Jats also becomes the Bahujan. But if they are the one who are basically, controlling land and committing atrocities, you can't simply, give this burden to Dalits, and okay, they are also Shudras, they are also Bahujan. No, this is so the word Bahujan, or the terminology, has to be localized in the present, in the contemporary socio material and the political condition, that where are we standing, where one particular community is standing. For instance, in Andhra, or in Maharashtra, if one has to cultivate this Bahujan term in, or they want it to spread across as a social consciousness, then one has to say very clearly that these dominant caste communities are not part of this Bahujan. Right? They are enemies. They are enemies of this, this very, because Bahujan, and still you can form a majority, because there are, because if you do not use the word Bahujan, then now you can ask that, "No, why I did not start an organization calling Bahujan." It's also because I see the scheduled caste mostly, as I said, after this post 90s neoliberal policies, where the only thing they had is a state minimum support in education and employment. Somehow the state after post 90s slowly has withdrawn itself, okay, to secure, to give any space to Dalits. Now majority of Dalits in present time also and in coming time, they will be majority, I mean, like they will not have much space, entering into this formal economy or formal education structure. And largely now, therefore, we see, that the, Dalits are becoming, earlier they were mostly the part of rural economy where they were landless laborers, and now they have increasingly becoming the cheap labor in the so-called urban economy. And therefore I believe that, to now I don't think it's good to burden scheduled caste, who are the only people after like having very less resources, to burden them with also carrying the movement for the OBCs, you know who who somehow actually, let's say, this what I can say, like, like for instance, nowadays, like, what happens that I laugh for you, like, you know, uh, like for instance, I pray for you, something like this. Okay, I am there to pray for you. No, I don't want Dalit to pray for anyone else. Now I want, Dalits to pray for themselves. To, like, tell, this is also the message that we want to give to other organizations and OBCs now, that our situation is so bad that we had something minimum, and that minimum is also does not exist anymore for us. Now we want to concentrate first on our situation, which is very bad, socially, economically, politically, which is very, very bad. I mean, like after working for 18 hours also, if someone is again treating me simply, or give, as untouchable. So, after means like, even I mean to say that if there is, I'm not saying there are not OBCs in the informal economy, or they are not suffering. They are equally, they are also suffering. But I am saying that the Dalits, their situation becomes very unique, you know, because they are the lowest of the low, and if they rebel, so it's not just the top Brahmin, upper caste, or the land Jamindars would go against them, but again, whichever caste is basically, a little bit, is in good position in a caste hierarchy, they also go against, scheduled caste. And therefore, now you see what's happening in Maharashtra also, the cases of atrocity and the mobilization around atrocities. Means after all these years, I don't see any OBC community who comes openly and say, okay, we are with them in this fight. No, I don't see that. So what has the Bahujan movement done to us? Basically, as I said, like, I am from Maharashtra, and when I participate in this so-called cultural and intellectual sphere, somewhere I get this sense that these OBC leaders and intellectuals, they know unconsciously or consciously, there's someone there to basically raise, or, do the movement for us, right? And those who are these people? Dalits, Ambedkarite Dalits, who will speak for everyone. No, I'm not saying that we don't want to speak about their issues. Obviously, in ISCA also, when we are raising this issue of reservation in private sector, we are not just simply saying this is for only for scheduled caste, but we are saying this should be for SC, ST, OBC, and also the nomadic communities who are economically, suffering, and at the historically, they have been, there at the lower rung. But at the same time, we want to also, as I said, highlight the point that we have entered in a time where scheduled caste once again have, is increasingly becoming, very weak. As I said, the Indian state has withdrawn itself into, securing even the basic minimum for them. So yes, I don't know, like, so yes, as I said, the Bahujan has some, importance, but that has to be localized, and that localization of Bahujan will only come when now the OBCs and their intellectuals, if there are some few intellectuals, they now, let's see. Even I see one OBC professor from JNU. He talks about caste. Most of his followers are Dalits, and even for that matter, people like this, who talks about, OBCs, I'm not blaming them. There must be like good people there, they're doing good work. But I see that their supporters, or their, whatever they get, mostly they're Dalits. My question is that how this is not going to do any positive development for, from these OBC intellectuals or individuals. Rather, I believe this is a time the ice caste message by forming the scheduled caste organization is also telling the message, the deeper message to the OBC intellectuals and the OBC organization that see boss, this is a high time now that we are not going to take your burden on our shoulder anymore. We are very clear now. So therefore, you have to become active. You have to now, and then obviously we are a part of a movement. We will come together and fight against this. The Brahmin, Savarna, imperialist. You know, those who have the complete monopoly on education, on economy, and on the cultural industry. So yes.
No, I think that's a fantastic point. I've always said this. I think the OBCs are in great debt of the kind of political and cultural risk that, especially the scheduled caste movement, has done. And I don't think any of the so-called OBC thinkers or intellectuals have even acknowledged that debt. मतलब लोग, you're very right. Like I've seen this around also, and even within OBCs, like up to government data is only saying it's been a capture by some 40-45 castes. There are
Hmm.
hundreds of OBC castes जिनको actually कुछ भी नहीं मिला है. So
Hmm.
wherever they've got a little bit of land, they've created political formulations. वो अपनी कम्युनिटी की भी हेल्प नहीं कर पाए हैं, उनके बच्चे
Hmm.
भी एक्चुअली वल्नरेबल ही हैं.
Hmm.
It's a very big crisis point for, like, I think the OBC, which really, I think it's a like, which is why OBC scholars don't like me, क्योंकि वो मेरे को बुलाते हैं. So I'll point out things like, this just to share with you. Like वो ऐसा एक पैनल होगा, like they'll put all the heroes of the movement ऐसे, तो उसमें ना बाबा साहेब को ऐसे छोटा सा डालेंगे, and then they'll be like Phule and Perrier and this and that. So basically, so I always raise the point, like, why are you putting Baba Sahib in small? You're here because of he's actually created the very big thing, but you're also subconsciously trying to create the message that, oh, actually, Phule is OBC and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. So you're also trying to create that leadership of
Yes.
equivalency, where that
Yes.
equivalency does not exist. So when I say things like
No,
that, then
apparently, I'll you basically reminded me one major thing which I missed. In Maharashtra, after Brahmins, who is the strongest supporter of RSS or their cadre base, comes from Mali community, Fule's community. And this is not, look at the things. And so my question is this: if it is about Bahujan, now we need to ask locally very clearly that what is happening at the local level. Was it simply the responsibility of Ambedkarite Dalits to conscientize or bring the consciousness among all OBCs? And even for that matter, let's see, most of the, even after that, you see the most of the agitation that happened in favor of Mandal Commission. There were many against Mandal Commission. We know the Brahmin students, upper caste students, they came on the street, all of that. You look at the other history, that the history that the OBC is coming on the street in favor of the Mandal commissions. That is, there is not a strong history. There were some few protests and all of that. If mostly Dalits, even if it has to defend the reservation for OBCs, it's mostly Dalits who. Now I'm saying that now I'm angry about it. No, I'm not simply angry about it. I'm rather more worried about these things, that that the OBC somewhere, they know that there are some people who will take this on their shoulder. Therefore our duty is just to basically to to pretend, that our hierarchy in this system. Okay, don't speak against, Brahmins, don't speak against the hierarchy. Okay, just be there, take the benefit also of reservation if it is available, and if not available, okay, even don't speak against it, simply be there. This is not how it should be. Now, therefore, the OBC has to them, like, and as I said, the Bahujan itself, the very 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 concept of Bahujan has to be localized, where you see that the which communities take. Like as I said, if the Malis are more the strongest supporter of RSS in this particular time after Brahmins in Maharashtra, One has to understand, then the one has to localize that concept of Bahujan in that way, that how like how are we going to, and then we have a leader like Chagan Bhujbal who wants to become a OBC leader, or who pretends as a OBC leader and all of that, or even like even Sharad Pawar becomes the Bahujan leader because he's a Maratha. This is not giving a clear picture. I guess the word Bahujan now has to be, rather should convert the reality, or capture the reality of those communities who are suffering really, who
Got it.
not just at the low at the caste order, but also who are suffering. As I said, the Kamma may come in Varna system as a Shudra, but I don't want to like how do you want that the landless laborer to basically work with that Kamma who is equally controlling land and the reason for a problem. He's a part of he's a problem. He's not so therefore this idea that we can bring the consciousness and then people will change. No, I don't think the change happens like this. The change also happens with the existing material condition that the community hold. If if the Marathas hold the land, and therefore their struggle is to preserve that land or get some benefit out of that land, if Maratha hold the political power, then it is difficult for you, for a Dalit or anyone, to convince that Maratha that they are a part of a Bahujan. No, this is nonsense, and this is what this most of the time Bamsep and other sad to and more than that, this very concept of Bahujan should also go beyond its local wisdom. They're saying, oh, okay, we had developed this washing knowledge. Dhobi were the first scientists who invented the soap. This is nonsense. This is not going to take us nowhere. As Ambedkarite, I believe that the knowledge should be very structured and scientific, even the ideological knowledge, which basically defines the existing inequality in very clear way, rather in this mystic way of going into the past and claiming again and again that we were the first scientists. Oh, because we are a farmer and we can tell you when the rain is going to come. We don't need the weather forecasting and all of that. I don't believe in this local wisdom, local knowledge kind of, and then you associate this with the Bahujan knowledge. I don't like that. I think we need to go beyond this, go for more scientific, concrete, ideological based knowledge.
No, that's actually very powerful. Like I get very depressed when I think about the OBC question, because actually kahan se aayega ye I have no idea, but it is very needed, and I think you're very right that there is a sense of complacency within thinkers from the movement, if I can say so, if it is a movement. Kyunki if you talk about Baba Sahib, scheduled caste will come and follow you, like you, raise you, become a thing. But you don't actually have to speak about caste against your own community, क्योंकि आपकी कम्युनिटी से आपको बेनिफिट मिल रहा है, आपके एमएलए होंगे, एमपी होंगे, कोई किनशिप स्ट्रक्चर है. सो यू आर डूइंग अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ बोथ. और जब इलेक्शन आता है या कम्युनिटी का क्वेश्चन आता है, यू कैन बिकम Yadav, then you can become something then. And when that is not there, you can become Ambedkarite. So there is that intellectual dishonesty that I do see very, very actively there playing out. And the material question is obviously very related. कि आपकी struggle ही क्या है? And even this idea of Shudra, like identity as a thing. I think Dr. Kanchailaya's new book, he'd called me, I had read the book, and I told him also in the book launch, okay, you're only talking about, structures of facing violence.
Hmm.
But if
Hmm.
you're talking of Shudras, they are also enforcing violence. तो
Hmm.
आपके ऊपर वायलेंस हो रहा है, वो ठीक है, आप भी तो वायलेंस कर रहे हो. यू हैव टू सी बोथ ऑफ दीज थिंग्स, राइट? एंड इफ यू आर डूइंग वन विदाउट द अदर, इट डजंट ऐड अप एक्चुअली. आप इसको कर ही नहीं
No, no,
सकते इस movements.
even if one goes with this Varna category of explaining who are Shudras and who are not Shudras, like or the Babasaheb takes itself, like for instance, the who were the Shudras. So the today's so-called business community were also part of the Shudras, right? Like this third Varna of Vaishya became a later part of a reality. Now, therefore, I say, like in therefore every as the way we began, like the movement always, it's not just the cultural, but it's also there, like this, the strong material part of a movement, that where do we stand, and who, to whom we are referring. As I said, in Bhakti time, we were referring the so-called divine authority, and then colonial time, the colonial masters, and the post-colonial time, we are asking the question to the so-called naked democracy, the Indian democracy, in the hands of the ruling caste, right? The post-Ambedkar time, we started asking a more deeper question and all of that. My question is this, and therefore why I you say this Bahujan word or the Bahujan terminology needs to be localized more. Not necessarily it should go with explaining this traditional way of Shudras and non-Shudras and all of that, but rather it should go more with explaining that how in the present condition which communities, and there are majorly, if there is one dominant caste or two dominant caste communities in particular region, there are majorly the OBCs who are not doing well. So anyway, you are going to form a majority, and we need to omit or eliminate this dominant OBCs from this entire Bahujan discourse. Who have been taking the benefit of both the benefit from the ruling classes, and also the benefit from the legitimacy that they get from the oppressed classes like SC, ST, and the other OBCs who are working on the ground or trying to form them. Look at this, for instance, this entire things that is Tamil Nadu is a very good example of it, right? Although they come as a Periyarist, and someone who believes in the Periyar ideology and all of that. Look at the situation of Sri Lanka in Tamil Nadu. So on the one hand, now being so-called a part of a Bahujan discourse, you cannot clearly call out them. You cannot clearly identify them as your enemy, because right. But at the local level in Tamil Nadu, they are the enemies of scheduled caste. The power in the ruling party, and even the opposition party, they both are enemies of the scheduled caste. Into the through sociological lens or even economical lenses, if you see, they are the one who have brought these structural barriers even in the economical development of scheduled caste in Tamil Nadu, and not just scheduled caste but also other small OBC castes who are nowhere, who are not in education, who are not there in the in cultural realm. There are only two, three major OBC dominant caste who are there, in the both the cultural representation and other things. So therefore, this Bahujan discourse has to be localized. It has to localize by surpassing some tangible realities. As I said, give the example of Tamil Nadu. As I gave the example of Maharashtra. I don't know, like there are many small OBC caste. Like one of my friend belong. I'm forgetting the name of that caste. Their work in the caste hierarchy, I don't know where do place their work, but that entire caste of OBCs is nowhere in the education. They do not have a single MLA. I mean, they have a history in the Maharashtra's political history, that they did not have a single MP or MLA to who can represent them in the Vidhan Sabha. So therefore, even the word, as I said, Bahujan, how we are going to use it, how we do, if we don't localize it, it is not going to even help, or forget about Dalits or even the OBCs for that matter.
No, I think Haryana election Vidhan Sabha is a great example of what you're saying. जहाँ पर non-Jat OBCs, actually the whole BJP project in Haryana is built around excluding the Jats and taking the other OBCs who are actually also okay to vote with the scheduled caste, but
Yes.
nobody will vote with the Jats. So you
Yeah.
are trying to create that differentiation, and that is very useful. Anyways, I've taken a lot of your time. Before we leave, quickly for our audiences, any projects that you're working on, that stuff that you're that we should look forward to coming from your desk and work, like would love to hear that a little bit.
No, I'm like like if as per the writing of works is concerned, I'm working on something, and which is going on. Although, because since I'm busy in like this organizational activity also, the amount of time that it requires, I don't think I'm able to give that much time. So, but yes, that writing part is going on. I hope it will come after 7 or 8 months, maybe, or 6 months. I'm hoping. And the other thing that from our organizational things, we are like that we have been working on this topic of reservation in private sector. So once again, ISCA, particularly in Maharashtra, is going to build a strong campaign around this very question of reservation in private sector by inviting and involving different scheduled caste, Ambedkarite, OBC organizations to form and to basically feel the urgency to form a unity around this question, which is not just the cultural but the real question, the material one. So yes, you will see in coming days this these things there in the public.
Great. We look forward to it. All the very best, and always very happy to see more of your work and see Iska grow. And all the very best, Bao. Thank you for speaking to us. Have a good
Thank you,
evening.
Ravi. Ravi. It was wonderful. It was wonderful, and I also wish you all best wishes, because I know you keep writing, keep saying things, and I know how it's difficult to survive in this system. So
Well, we
yes,
get by. You are an inspiration. Thank you. Jai Bhim.
thank you, Ravi. Jai Bhim, Jai Bhim, Jai Bhim. Bye.
Hey, you finished the whole episode. Well done. I can't believe you can tolerate my voice for so long. But in case you liked what you heard, you might consider also joining for the exclusive episode that I do for my paying subscribers, because that show gets into slightly edgier topics and I don't really want to put it out in the public domain. It's available on the Patreon as well as on YouTube through the join option. And in case you don't want to drop extra money, I completely understand. Please keep listening to my regular show. I'm grateful as ever. There's a buy me a coffee link in case you want to drop some love. Otherwise, just have a nice day. Stay being awesome. Bye bye.